I think we're live. Is that right?
Are we live? Okay, it is
Oh,
11 o'clock on,
it's about time.
we're not, okay. For those of you that are joining us, we come on about five different platforms. So thank you for allowing us to
Yeah.
be with you
It's
today.
it's it's working. It's working, Stuart. I think we're fine.
It's okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Stuart Fournier. I'm a 25-year veteran of the real estate industry here in Los Angeles, and particularly the South Bay. And it's my pleasure to introduce my co-host.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anastasia Bonholzer, and I am notably known as your loan queen, a mortgage broker in the South Bay, and I'm also licensed in Texas and Florida. Welcome, everyone.
So today we have an exciting subject that I know Anastasia is very passionate about. She's so passionate about it, went and became an expert, certified expert, but I'll let her
No,
talk to you
certified
about.
expert. That's another notch on my belt. I've officially, as of last year, I became a certified veteran lending specialist. So this is given to a pedigree of loan officers out there who have gone through the extra training to make sure that I understand how to utilize the VA loan to make sure that my clients qualify. Because there's unfortunately, a lot of fake loan officers out there claiming they know how the VA loan works. It is a different loan and it is more complicated. And that's what we're here to break down today.
So yeah, let me get started a little bit here, and then I'm going to let Anastasia take a majority of the show today. But what I'd like to do is, first of all, emphasize that if you have any questions while we discuss it in the next 10 to 15 minutes, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section, give us some likes. This is an exciting thing for us that we do every Tuesday at 11 a.m. We talk about real estate and we talk about the behind the scenes facts about real estate. We try to get away from the headlines and get into what's actually happening and how we can help you directly. And so if you have any comments, please let us know. So I want to start off today, even though I'm not the expert at this, by letting Anastasia know what the agent culture is, which I know is it's hard for her to get through. And I've been doing this for 25 years, and I can tell you, Anastasia, when I first started out in the early 2000s, we were told as agents by the superior high-end agents who had been around for a long time, don't even think about a VA loan.
Terrible. How
It
dare
was,
they? Whoever
yeah.
they are.
But it was so overwhelming that we were like, okay, we said the VA word. But I'll tell you why specifically they thought, and I know you're going to clear this up, but the number one reason was that there were seller responsibilities that
Mhm,
agents felt they didn't have control over on the other end. And so
mhm,
that made it a little, difficult. Also, the loan limits, of course, when you have tremendous increase in value that we have, especially Manhattan Hermosa, it just doesn't apply. That was number two. And then the number three reason was that sense of red tape, that sense that the government's involved. So therefore, it's not going to be a good thing. It's not going to be an easy fit. And they sold that idea and that culture to their sellers as well. So I know you know better, and
a
I
lot of
was,
misconceptions, a lot of
yeah,
myths that we're here to debunk because it's unfortunate that back in the day, you know, the general public was kind of given these negative aspects about the veteran loan, and the veteran loan is a benefit. Thank you to all the service members out there, and
absolutely.
there's just so much misinformation out there, and it's too bad that the sellers are not aware of the huge benefits as it pertains to the qualifications of the individuals who are being qualified for this loan. And just because, and the biggest myth of all is just because these buyers coming in are coming in with 0% down payment, they're allowed to have 100% finance loan, does not mean that as a result they're less qualified than somebody coming in with 10% down payment, even 50% down payment. I mean, it's truly that much of a myth, is because it's people think it's 0% down payment, suddenly that's not a qualified individual.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I did want to make this point. For example, in Manhattan Beach, we have, for lack of a better word, generational wealth that's being handed down. And I don't think that some of these people that are obviously pretty wealthy realize that they can actually access loans. Obviously, you need to be a vet for their children who are going to move back into this area that find it difficult. So to me, given that, and I know you're going to get into this, loan limits are not what you think they are. It's something to look into.
Yeah, the loan limits are based on eligibility. So somebody coming in, we are looking to make sure that they have their eligibility instated. And a veteran, or actually even a active duty member, and that's another myth, is people think that the VA loan is only for first-time home buyers, only for veterans. There are
Right.
actually other categories of borrowers, such as active duty. Somebody could be in the military for 5, 10 years and be eligible for a VA loan, and their certificate of eligibility is available on their VA portal. They just log in, and it's actually their e-benefits tab in their VA portal, and everybody who's a veteran or who's a reservist can actually log in and take a look at that. The other myth is it's only available for veterans. So if you have actually a spouse who lost their veteran husband, she may be qualified as well, through the deceased partner's VA benefits as well.
Right.
Taking that aside, though, the biggest myth that you want to mention is the Manhattan Beach market. Obviously, high end homes, and you can definitely, there's no such thing as limits per se. It's based on eligibility. So somebody could qualify for a higher loan amount, and there's technically speaking no loan amounts. It's all based on eligibility, which is 25% is backed by the US government. It's basically the US Department of Veteran Affairs backs the loan, 25% of it. And it's the same thing as if Uncle Sam was coming in and they're the co-signer for 25% of the loan. That's truly how it works. And that's how I want everybody to understand of why the VA is such a powerful loan for just borrowers, and why they're not using it is beyond me, but they're just not understanding it. So what
Okay,
does
so
that
let's,
mean? Yeah.
no, I'm
So
just
what
saying,
does that
let's see.
mean? It's basically, on paper it looks like somebody's coming in with 0% down, but 25% of it is backed by the US government. So when lenders are pricing these loans, when 25%, what does that mean? It negates mortgage insurance, and you also have much more favorable interest rates, because we're pricing this loan as if it has a 25% down payment.
Right.
And then,
Right.
so for a small segment of the population, the only thing that we're putting in place of mortgage insurance is called a funding fee. A funding fee on the first time use VA loan is 2.15% of the purchase price. And the funding fee could actually be waived for those individuals who have a 10% or greater disability rating. So there are ways to avoid the funding fee, which gets tacked onto the loan. So
Right.
essentially, somebody's borrowing more than 100% of the purchase price for the VA loan.
Wow. So let's take Manhattan Beach as an example. We've got average price range, or the average house now is $3.5 million. I would never have thought as an agent to go to
So how
a
do we do
client
it?
and say,
Right? That's
yeah,
that's 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 the price point here. So how do we do it? It's based on somebody's income. Obviously, income still being a huge considerable factor in all of this. They still need to prove the ability to repay. VA loans a little bit different. We don't have a debt to income ratio. What we looking at is the residual income. How much income is left over for the veteran to live on? And a couple of contributing factors exist in this loan, and they don't exist in other loans. For instance, the size of the home. It matters how many square feet the size of the home is. So we put that in our equations. We also take a look to see how many household people are living in the home. So the more people you have in the home, the more residual income you will need to qualify for the loan. Another main factor is the condition of the home. That being one of the main factors of why sellers are a little bit scared, right, of going through the trying to qualify a veteran, is because we cannot have any termite damage. The U.S. government wants a veteran to move in, basically a move-in ready home. It can be an outdated home, but cannot have any peeling, paint, or termite damage. Just the same as with an FHA loan. So there's
right.
really not much difference.
And that's the disconnect that I think realtors way back in the day took a little bit too far, was that what you had was the federal government saying, Look, these are the things that are important when you buy a house. Now, in the commercial world, there's no responsibility for that to a degree. I shouldn't say that. I'm kind of talking loan companies down a little bit. But when you're dealing with the government has a responsibility to let people know exactly where they stand. And I think
Yeah.
that's, in fact, where we kind of
You
got
just
off
don't
the track a little
put
bit.
veteran into a situation where they're going to have a fixer upper. What if it's an active duty military member and they're now have to, go to their job, and now they need to deal with termites? So they just made it a qualification of the
Right,
home has to be of a certain degree, which most homes qualify, like literally. And the concern here is, what if it doesn't? What if my appraisal comes in subject to, because the front door happens to have some termite damage and now everybody's freaking out? Not a
right,
big deal. Then you just
right.
patch up the door, you get the appraiser to come back, and now you have a loan again.
So this to be clear, uh, with regard to the red tape, let's say we have an example where that's happening. It's the same relationship between the loan officer and the realtor to clear that up. It's not as though the VA all of a sudden makes a phone call and says, "Okay, this is done and we have to
The
have this,"
lender,
right?
exactly. The lender is the one that clears everything, and the loan to the VA is only gets sold at the very end during the time of processing. So you actually go through, and the VA loan can close as early as 21 days, just like any other loan. It doesn't take longer to close. It just really depends on the competency of the loan officer and their handling of the different loan
Right,
process.
right.
You can actually even buy a multifamily with a VA loan. I mean, there's
That's what I was
again,
going to
so
ask you next. Right.
yeah,
So
so
again,
it's
passing down that, I'm sorry,
yeah.
passing down that generational wealth. I'm a veteran and I've got buku assets. You know, what
So
what kind of
somebody can come
assets?
in and
Right.
buy a fourplex with 0% down payment. How they
Interesting.
so there's a couple of different ways, and this is where somebody who's a loan officer needs to be experienced in this type of loan product in order to qualify the client correctly to begin with. So if somebody's coming in wanting to buy a fourplex, if they do not have any previous landlord experience, we are not able to use the rents from the other units that are not being occupied by the veteran towards the loan. Just not possible. We need at least 1 year of experience. That person needs to have experience being a landlord, handling. Like one time, there was a client where they were in a property management type situation where they were able to handle monies coming in and out. They were able to get 100% financing loan and use the market rents for qualifying.
Interesting.
Most people
Interesting.
coming in, if they're a first time home buyer, yes, they can buy a fourplex, but their sole income has to carry the entire mortgage. But in that case, maybe perhaps to get something smaller. And then imagine once those rents do start to come in, now potentially most, if not all, of the mortgage will be covered by the rents. And that's the beauty of the VA loan is get somebody to come in 0% down payment. If the funding fee exists, you tack that onto the loan. The most important fact of all is there is still closing costs. Closing costs are 2 to 3% of the purchase price. And that's what most loan officers don't quite, they're not always articulating. Everybody's so hyper focused on down payment that they're not telling the veterans that, yes, you can buy this home with 0% down. That doesn't mean 0% out of pocket. So in most cases,
Right.
that 0%, yes, it's true for the actual loan qualification, but there are closing costs associated with the loan, just like any other loan. Where would one come up with that money? It can be a gift from family. It can come from the veteran themselves. It can also come from a seller credit or a combination of a seller and lender credit. And that's where somebody essentially would come in and, yes, there are closing costs to a VA loan. I don't want that to be a misnomer. That's
Yeah,
misunderstood.
no, there's always closing costs. So let's talk about loan limits one more time, because I think this is where people think, the VA gives no more than 800,000 or 900,000. That's just not the case
That's just
number.
not correct.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
it used to be back in the day where it was up to the conforming loan limits,
right.
but it's now based on eligibility based on income. How much residual income does one have left over? And it is a very specific calculation. We literally have to put in our system, how much does the person make? What are their debts? How big is the home in square footage? What are the approximate, even electrical and gas? There's actually it goes pretty. The loan officer has to determine in advance of what those costs are, and it should be pretty specific. And that's why I always engage with my realtor partners to try to say, well, how big is this home? What is the current, homeowner paying for their gas,
Right, right,
electricity or whatever? I can put that on my system correctly. But
right.
yes,
And
there
I
are
think,
no loan limits to a
yeah,
degree.
and
There are lender overlays. So lender overlay means that if you're working with a specific bank, some of them do carry their own internal overlays. Sometimes it's 1.5 million, sometimes it's 2 million. I have not personally seen a VA loan that has a higher loan limit than 2 million, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
right, right. Okay. And the number of loans you can get as a veteran is not limited either.
It's technically not limited to a degree. It's not a one-time use loan. If the entitlement is for a house that's less expensive and you still have some entitlement left over, it is possible for the veteran to go out and get another loan again. Especially if they're moving around, if they're being transferred to another base, they can essentially move around and get that. If their entitlement, 100% of their entitlement is tied to the previous loan, then no, there's no more entitlement left. So they will have to come in with a down payment. And the entitlement
Okay.
is that 25% down payment kind of, bracket. So it's a very mathematical thing. It's kind of more than impossible to talk about it online in a more practical sense.
Right,
But the
right.
most important thing is to understand that yes, you can use the VA loan more than once. The VA loan is tied to entitlement, and somebody should not give up their VA loan. And I know recently what I've been seeing is, being able to transfer your VA loan to another veteran. Especially if you're selling the home, you want the other veteran to come in and to get their lower interest rate. Um, that entitlement is now going to be that stays with the house. So
Interesting.
yeah, so again, it's
So it's
you don't
almost like
actually.
in a very sort of obscure way, it's kind of an owner finance, excuse me, it's kind of an owner finance things in that that loan can actually be transferred to the next buyer.
Yeah, the transferable. Yeah, there are two different loans that are transferable. There's an FHA, and then the VA. The VA again is you can only transfer to another veteran potentially, or you can actually
Right.
transfer it to anyone in the public, but the veteran loses his or her eligibility. So I don't ever,
Ah, that
I
makes sense.
don't
Yeah.
ever want I don't ever want my homeowner to do that because they end up losing that benefit that's actually tied to their own, service.
Again and
But if
again, a
they
complication based on
want that,
age, based right, based on
yeah,
age, based on
yeah,
maybe you're giving it to a family member or something like that. So it's not something
correct.
that's
There
common,
are
but
opportunities
right,
where it makes sense, but for most of the time, especially if it's just a stranger off the
right,
street, just to give them a 3% interest rate is not.
right, right. We're not going to advertise that.
Right, 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 right.
It's an
But yeah,
option. Well,
it's a wonderful product, and the most disappointing thing about it is only 9% of all veterans in California are utilizing the VA loan. And most of the time
wow,
I'm thinking, why? What's happening to our veterans
right,
of why they're not using it? Well, sometimes here's from my experience. Sometimes they're embarrassed to talk about it, to maybe their service, maybe there's some PTSD, not to get into that psychology behind it, but that's always one of the first things I ask is, are you a veteran? And I'm surprised more often than not how many people choose not to tell me that up front. I actually have to actively ask them that question. So maybe they're
right,
not telling their loan officer that they're a veteran. That's could be a factor. The second factor is they're ashamed of their credit score. Maybe they had a recent bankruptcy that they don't want to share or whatever. The loan officer is going to discover that anyways. But I would always encourage veterans to reach out to any competent loan officer to talk about their credit worthiness because veteran VA loans don't actually have a minimum credit score. The credit score component comes from actual lender overlays, which is the financing company. In this case, the Veteran Administration does not finance the loan; they back the loan, but you still have to go
right,
out to a
right.
bank to actually get the money. And then you know we just need to be more proactive in letting veterans know that this is available to them. Most often than not, they can, house hack, for instance, if they don't want to have a burdensome mortgage that's too high for what they want to do because they're moving a lot around a lot because of the military. Put roommates in there. Buy a home. Buy a duplex. Buy something where it's still you're utilizing that 100% financing loan and building that generational wealth through that asset acquisition.
Well, this is exactly why we do the show, everyone. We want to give you information out there that you may not normally have. Obviously, Anastasia is very passionate about this, and with good reason, because I've learned something. I've learned about 4 or 5 things just listening to her today. And so that's the purpose. We want to get some information you may not have heard before, some fresh new perspective, especially when it comes to VA loans. That needs to be done. I am no longer part of the culture that will not mention VAs. I hope you've converted me for that
Yeah,
reason alone.
I
But
hope so.
yeah, it's a real missed
They're very
opportunity for sure.
representative. And it's
Right.
actually just one last tidbit about VAs. They have the lowest foreclosure rates among any other loan product. Imagine we have so many
And
different loans, everything from conventional FHA to non QM, bank statement, asset depletion. I can go
right,
on, jumbo. And
right.
VA, 0% down payment still ends up being the lower, the loan with the lowest foreclosure rates. And that's a testament to the type of people that are out there getting, military people
Military.
tend to be very strict, very direct, very strict. And I hope that this webinar will give some insight and light to any seller out there who wants to sell. And please don't turn away a veteran. I mean, obviously, it has to be a well qualified loan, so you want to make sure that it's been fully vetted. But don't take a veteran away just because they're using the VA loan, especially with
Right.
0% down payment.
Well, we've gone about 5 minutes over than we normally do, but it was something that I thought was necessary. As you can see, the passion in her face and the passion in her eyes is obvious, and she knows what she's talking about. So, if you have any
Yeah.
questions or you'd like us to address anything that you heard today, or you'd like to hear from us, please feel free to call. There are 2 flyers that we were going to put up, but we certainly didn't need them because I think listening to Anastasia today was almost covered most of them. But if you'd like a copy of these flyers that highlight the misconceptions, we'll be happy to send that to you. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
gonna let you
Thanks
take
so
us out.
I appreciate it. Stuart, what are we doing next week? I would love to collaborate on a topic that you're really passionate about. How about
Let's talk.
getting ready? I want to know how to get your home ready for sale, because there's a
Okay.
lot of things, misconceptions of what I need or what I don't need. And I think the reason why a large population, especially in the South Bay, that are not selling currently is because they think they're not ready. Maybe too much stuff in the garage. Maybe they're overwhelmed about the number of small projects they need. How can you help them, especially with the Compass concierge program? Maybe we can throw in a little Compass action here of how can you help us get prepared for sale of their home?
Okay, sounds great to me. That's what we'll talk about next week. We'll talk about getting your house ready for sale. Now, I used to have this saying that says, "Are you ready to sell, but your house isn't?" That was our theme. So we'll get that done. All right. See you next
All
time,
right.
everyone, on Sand to
Bye.
Soul. Bye bye.